Hey, hey, hey. Time for another Out of This World story from rSpace. Sometimes karma doesn't need any help. It just needs patience. Today on rSpace, nothing is more satisfying than watching a cheater scramble when they realize the game is over. Found out about wife's affair through her affair partner's wife, so we both filed for divorce and left them together in their mess. Longtime lurker here. I honestly never thought I'd find myself making a post here, but I guess nobody does. Just a few months ago, if you told me I'd be where I am now, writing about the collapse of my marriage online, I would have told you to find another sucker to fool. But here we are. I, 31 male, met my wife, Sarah, 31 female, when we were both 25 and fresh out of college. There's no romantic story there. We met in a grocery store, and I thought she was cute. I worked up the nerve to ask her out. She said yes, and the rest was history. We bonded in a way that only two struggling young adults can. We'd rant about crappy bosses and talk well into the night about our big dreams. We moved in together after a year of dating and eventually got married at 28. By that time, we both had promising careers. We hadn't taken over the world yet, but we were earning pretty well with lots of room for growth. For the most part, I thought we were happy. There were ups and downs, sure, but nothing out of the ordinary. We were both making an effort to keep the relationship going strong. Sarah was the person I pictured myself growing old with. So, it came completely out of nowhere when I received a message from one of her coworkers, Emily. Emily was the wife of one of Sarah's coworkers, Jason. I barely knew Jason. I'd met him a couple of times, but I don't think we'd ever had a full conversation. I knew Emily even less than I knew him. Emily's message was straight to the point. "I think our spouses are having an affair. Can we talk?" I just sat there, staring at my phone screen for a while. It couldn't be real. Every part of me was telling me that this had to be some sort of cruel lie or some really stupid joke. But I couldn't ignore it either. If there was some truth there, then I had to know what was going on. Something in my gut told me to respond, so I did. I told her that she was making a very heavy claim and asked her if she had any proof of what she said. I regretted asking that almost immediately because she did have proof and she sent it over to me. There were screenshots of messages between her husband and someone named S. Based on the messages, he and S were clearly seeing each other. There were a lot of suggestive messages and more than a few that were outright explicit. There were no photos that would directly prove that S was my wife, though the name S for Sarah was enough to suggest so. That didn't matter though. I was certain it was my wife. The way the texts were written stood out so clearly to me that it might as well have been a portrait of her face. I didn't reply to Emily for a while. I remember just sitting there and trying to digest the monumental information I'd just been hit over the head with. My wife was cheating on me. The proof was sitting right in front of me. Whenever I could convince myself that I was imagining it, that it couldn't possibly be true, I'd open up the screenshots again, and there would be my wife's distinct writing style, staring back at me like some sort of digital thumbprint, daring me to convince myself that it wasn't true. It had probably been a few hours before I responded to Emily and asked if we could meet in person. She agreed and we arranged a meeting at a small cafe nearby. When I arrived, she was already there. She looked just as shaken and miserable as I felt, maybe even more than me. I said a quick hi and sat across from her. I don't even remember if I ordered anything. If I did, I didn't drink it. She ordered a coffee that sat untouched in front of her. She wasted no time in pulling out the proof. She showed me more messages, including a rough timeline of their dates and meetings that she'd put together based on what she'd found in their messages. She'd done full financial forensics and had even uncovered some suspicious credit card transactions that implied they'd been having dinners and renting hotel rooms. I was worthless while I went through her timeline. It was pretty meticulous and left little room for doubt. I checked it against the messages she had, somehow hoping that I'd find some small mistake that would prove this whole thing was a misunderstanding. Obviously, I knew that wasn't possible. There was nothing that could possibly explain the graphic and inappropriate messages these two married people were sending to each other. I could feel a piercing headache building up. She told me that they'd been seeing each other for half a year, and she'd never suspected a thing. She probably wouldn't have found out if Jason hadn't gotten sloppy. One day, he'd left his phone on a table and a notification from S had popped up. She said the obvious codename had sparked her curiosity, so she unlocked his phone and took a look. She hadn't confronted him yet. She'd just been taking screenshots and building up timeline. When I looked up from the pile of evidence, Emily was watching me with a very wary face. But it wasn't just that. There was her sympathy too. She took no pleasure in dropping all this on my head, but she'd done the right thing. There was a part of me that also wondered if she just didn't want to go through all this alone. I'd probably go crazy if I had to face this kind of thing on my own. As it stood, we were sort of allies now. When she spoke, her voice was just as tired as her face looked. She asked me what I planned to do about it. I told her that I wasn't going to spend another second of my life with someone who could betray me like Sarah had. She smiled humorlessly and told me that she agreed. We discussed it some more and both agreed that we couldn't give them the pleasure of seeing us cry or break down. We were both prepared to leave them. They could have each other and their lies. When Sarah got back that day, it was business as usual. She was all smiles and sweet comments. She chatted about her day, telling me about things her coworkers had done that annoyed her. It was all very mundane. It seemed impossible to me that this could be the same person that was stabbing me in the back. I didn't say a word to her about Emily or what she'd shown me. I just kept playing dumb. The oblivious husband without a clue in the world. Later that night, when she was sleeping, I grabbed her phone from where it was charging and took it into the living room. My heart was racing, so I unlocked it and scrolled to her messages. I believed Emily was telling me the truth, but I knew I couldn't go through with this if I didn't verify it myself. It turned out Emily had even kept some of it from me. Turns out they'd sent each other explicit photos and videos, a lot of them. Emily might not have seen those on Jason's phone, or maybe she wasn't comfortable showing them to me. That didn't matter. Honestly, I was reeling. I felt like Sarah had punched me in the gut. I couldn't bring myself to sleep next to her that night. I plugged her phone back in and went to sleep on the couch. She wasn't pleased in the morning. We got into a fight over me sleeping on the couch the night before. She insisted that I tell her what was wrong. I wasn't in the mood to be helpful and switched between telling her it was nothing and that she could figure it out herself. I was still disgusted with her, so I took extra pleasure in being aggravating. I was clearly getting under her skin, and I felt like the small playback for what she'd done to me. She ranted for a bit, and I sat back, enjoying her anger, until she said something that pissed me off. She accused me of being closed off and unavailable. I couldn't believe that was coming from someone who was having a whole affair. For months, she'd been brushing me off when I tried to initiate any form of intimacy. Some days, she'd give me the silent treatment when I tried to communicate with her. She'd make excuses when I tried to make plans for a date night, but I was the unavailable one? Couldn't believe the hypocrisy. I didn't trust myself to answer that, so I ignored her the rest of the morning until I left for work. When I got back home in the evening, I'd had some time to cool down, and she'd had some time to think it through. She might have realized the weight of what I might potentially know. She was a lot more patient and cautious this time, pointedly ignoring the conflict we'd had in the morning. I didn't care to bring it up either. I'm done putting in effort with her. She'll see what unavailable really looks like. I'm just counting the days while I prepare to hit her with a divorced mom. I gotta say, there's something deeply satisfying about knowing she has no clue what's coming. Make sure she realizes she didn't just get caught. She got outplayed. Nothing stings more than knowing she was never in control of the situation to begin with, and believe me, she thinks she has you wrapped around her finger. Update. Emily and I kept in touch, researching options for divorce lawyers and making sure we were both fully prepared for what was down the road for us. We also talked about how we'd get back at them. I'd had my plan laid out ever since she said I was closed off and unavailable. I was slowly paying less and less attention to her, drifting away. She noticed it too. She started making more of an effort, but it was too little, much too late. I kept checking in on her phone while I was preparing for the divorce. Emily was doing the same. Sarah and Jason were still going at it. They were still going on their dates and making excuses to find time for each other. It was pathetic watching Sarah worm around wondering what was wrong with us while she was still getting piped by another man. Emily was bitterly amused by that observation, mainly because Jason didn't seem to notice anything was wrong. She felt hurt seeing him completely oblivious to what he was doing to her. She took some comfort in the idea that the divorce would completely come out of the blue to him. Eventually, everything was ready, and it was time to serve them with their papers. We both had different ideas about how we'd approach the act of serving them with the papers. Emily served Jason in person. She said the shock on his face made everything worth it. The smug SOB had actually said, "But why? Everything is going perfect." I took a different approach with Sarah. She came home one evening to find that I'd left divorce papers and house keys on the kitchen counter. If she went deeper into the house to look for me, then she'd find out that I'd packed all my stuff. I went back to the house while she was at work, and I packed everything that was important to me. I didn't tell her where I'd gone. I didn't have any interest in seeing her, apart from whatever contact we would need to go through with the divorce. She called me, of course, and she was crying and panicking. She asked me where I was and begged me to come home so that we could talk. I told her there was nothing to talk about anymore. There hadn't been for a while. But if she really felt the need to talk to someone, Jason was always there for her. The silence on the other end was so thick that I actually thought the call had been disconnected, and then the cliche, "Wait, I can explain." She tried to tell me that Jason meant nothing to her. It was just a workplace relationship that had gone too far, and she'd regretted it the whole time. I told her to cut the BS. Cheating even once isn't a mistake. She'd been sleeping with this guy for more than half a year now, and I was supposed to believe she didn't mean it? She just kept begging me to reconsider. I said there was nothing to talk about. The damage was done. Emily and I had done both of them a favor of leaving them free for each other. Now there was nothing stopping them from being together. Of course, it rarely works out that way. Once there was nothing to hide behind, the cracks in their relationship will break it apart. Without the thrill of sneaking around, they were just two lousy cheaters stuck with each other. Emily told me that Jason had tried to reconcile with her, claiming he'd made a mistake and that he loved her, not Sarah. She'd laughed in his face, then told him to stop embarrassing himself and sign the papers. Sarah wasn't doing much better. She was persistent in trying to contact me, but I was ignoring her now. She had my phone buzzing with message after message. I read them sometimes, but I didn't reply. She'd be sad most of the time, asking me to give her another chance, and then she'd get mad at me, accusing me of throwing away our marriage over a single mistake. One day, I answered one of her calls out of sheer curiosity. I knew she didn't have anything to say that could possibly change my mind, but I was curious all the same. She sounded miserable when she answered. She admitted that she and Jason had been fighting recently. They'd had a big one a few days ago, and they weren't going to see each other again. I honestly couldn't comprehend why she was telling me this. Did she think I was going to run back to her because her affair partner broke up with her? Was I supposed to feel pity for her? What was she on? Then she turned around and accused me of ruining our marriage too quickly, like she hadn't spent months making a fool of me while she snuck around with her coworker. I couldn't believe the foolishness I was hearing. I started to consider the possibility that she might be drunk. She was speaking too clearly for that, so I threw that idea away. She really was just that delusional. I asked her one simple question. If Emily had reached out to me, would she have ever told me the truth? She was completely silent after that. There was no answer. The answer didn't need to be said because we both knew it. She never would have stopped. She just wanted to keep me as a safety net while she went around having her fun with Jason. I didn't wait for her to break the silence. I just ended the call. There really was nothing left to say to her anymore. I blocked her number after that. If she wanted to cry to someone about her troubles with her affair partner, she could find someone else. Emily and I kept in touch for a while, mainly to keep each other updated on how things were going. We were kind of becoming friends after going through all of this together. She let me know when Jason finally signed the papers. He dragged his feet the whole way. He'd even attempted to rekindle the relationship more than a few times, but she shut him down every time. As for Sarah, I don't know much of what she's up to anymore. The divorce was finalized and went about as well as I could expect. I got a clean break, and I'm grateful for that. I probably had Emily's huge pile of evidence to thank for that. Emily's divorce is still going on, but it seems to be going her way too. That makes me happy. She's a good person, and she deserves a win. And her piece of crap husband ruined both our lives. I'll be glad to see him take whatever karma decides to dish up for him. After the divorce, I didn't hear from Sarah for a while. I still had her blocked on everything. She managed to find a way to sneak around that, though. She actually tried reaching out to me through mutual friends. Sometimes she'd ask them to relay a message. On one occasion, she actually called me with a friend's phone. That was when I put my foot down and made it clear to everybody that I wanted no part in her life. Last I heard, she moved somewhere new after we'd finalized the divorce. The reason for the divorce was no secret, and it seemed she couldn't bear to be around her friends and colleagues with the stigma hanging over her head. As for Emily, we grab a coffee every now and then. There's nothing romantic there, just two people who went through hell together thanks to some selfish people in their lives. She's doing pretty well. Much like me, she's not ready to start dating again, but she's doing well at work, and she's filling up her free time with new hobbies. She suggested I do the same, and it really does help you move on. I picked up the guitar again after dropping it as a teenager, and it's doing wonders for my mental health. It took a while, but I'm starting to do better now. It wasn't easy to cut out a long relationship, but I knew I couldn't survive with that level of toxicity and betrayal in my life. If you're a guy in a similar situation, I recommend you do the same thing. Cut that cheating hoe off. You deserve better than that. It's kind of funny when people think they're living in some untouchable fairy tale, sneaking around, acting like they had some epic, forbidden romance, only to crumble the second the secrecy wore off. Literally, some cheaters only cheat because they love the high they get from sneaking around and living dangerously. If you found out your partner was cheating, would you go to the slow burn revenge like OP did, or would you confront them immediately? What's your move? Thank you for joining us today on rSpace. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.